Good evening, good morning, and good night. Welcome to Inappropriate Radio. It's your host, Shauna. Let's get into this. So, hi guys. As you know, we've been phasing through this series about the periodic table. Not sure if you've been following, but we've been taking it one element at a time. We decided to first cover the 4 elements that are essential to 96% of the living organisms in this earth, which are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So far, we've covered oxygen, and I spoke about this maybe 2-3 episodes ago. I've asked a few people who were primarily educators what they thought the most important element was, and out of about 10 to 12 people, I want to say maybe 80% of those people said oxygen. I myself said hydrogen, along with one other person. One person said carbon, and 2 other people said water. They couldn't choose between hydrogen and oxygen. Now, the reason why this is important is for multiple things, but the first is to simply just educate ourselves, right? We have actual access, being humans, depending where you are geographically, but we have access to these elements. They are natural. At least 80% of them, right, are natural. Others are synthetic. We'll get into that, about all the groups that they belong to and whatnot. But I just thought it was important to go over these 4 because, again, everything that lives, or almost everything that lives in this planet, is composed and comprised of those 4 elements. Now, what I thought to be most interesting is that when I was doing my research, I found out that hydrogen is actually the most abundant in the universe, right? Not just on Earth like oxygen or nitrogen, right? So that was the first thing that I thought was important. And then, this is all Googleable. Remember, this is surface level stuff. But of course, it's not surface level, because if it's in the universe, then what it connects us to, this is one of those gases that is connecting us, in which is so even crazier, is that Jupiter is said to have frozen hydrogen on it, because it actually it turns into a liquid at 423 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really different from all of the other gases because it's so light. We'll get into the details, right? But the first thing that I wanted to discuss was, obviously, it's the first element listed on the table. It's colorless, odorless, tasteless, but highly combustible, and it can react to electronegative properties that are more or less electromagnetic, and it reacts to other metals. Now, what I also found to be interesting is that hydrogen is being used as therapy. Now, I was just saying, okay, how are we going to connect this spiritually, right? And then I'm like, oh, okay. So not only is it the most abundant element in the universe, but it's now being used or seen as the next solution to methane and therapy, right? So and this is all new. They're still doing research, and they had a lot of animals that they've been testing some other things on. But as far as humans goes, the liver and arthritis is said to be really good for both of those, and it's actually called H2. okay? And speaking of two, hydrogen actually is comprised of two different types of molecules. So that's another thing that makes this gas really unique, called parahydro and orthohydro. This is not a chemistry class, so I'm not going to go into that. Again, totally Googleable, right? Now, this is actually sought to be next to replace like gas boilers, and not replace electric cars, but used to be paired with electric cars, or another option other than electric car, because when it burns, it doesn't release carbon dioxide. It only releases water. So it's not like methane or other, gases, right, that are used to provide electricity. Now, as far as the earth is concerned, hydrogen is actually responsible for breaking down the emissions from the sun, which gives us heat and sunlight. So without hydrogen, we wouldn't even have like heat and sunlight, right? Or power, electricity. So yeah, and again, it is highly combustible, so that means that it is actually not to be paired with fire or heat and air, right? It can actually cause an explosion. Although it is light, it's not dense, it's still highly combustible, especially H2, right? Also called dihydrogen. Dihydrogen, okay? And yeah, we talked about it being able to be oxidized by elements that are more or less electronegative. You can look into that. So now, what's interesting is that hydrogen is said to be the only gas that existed after the Big Bang Theory, along with lithium and helium. And then as the atmosphere cooled down, then electrons and protons started to form, and then we started to get all these other gases. Stars would actually lose their shine and fall without hydrogen. It'll only be left with helium, which is not enough to keep the star ablaze. So to me, it seems pretty important, right? It's 75% of the mass in the universe and 10% of the mass of the human body. Okay? So our bodies is 10% hydrogen. So we definitely need hydrogen, okay? Now, taking this back to being the most abundant element in the earth, and this being considered as a new alternative to fuel not only our homes, but our cars, and to be the potential next natural medicine, because it is a natural gas that is the hardest to harness, right? This is totally spiritual. I believe that it was the most important because it only has this one atomic number, right? So obviously something is important there, because it's like the beginning, right? It's like the beginning, and then we get to see how it is able to be paired with so many other elements. Now, it can be categorized as a metal or a gas, a non-metal, okay? Depending on the temperature. So that's also important. And as we phase through this, we're probably going to be on this, not a while, but we need to first go over the first four important, and then obviously there are another four that are also relevant. We talked about this, the sulfur, the phosphorus, right? We went over this, but at least the four elements that are essential to almost all of the living organisms were important. And then we're going to go over and start breaking down the groups. And then that way we'll have a better idea of the groups, because these classes are broken down by the properties. So at least once we know the first four and we can say which properties they go, which groups they go into, we'll be able to start better understanding the other elements that are also in those groups, because we understand those elements. Okay, so I think that was important, and this is mostly important because as we start going into being a more independent people, living off the land, learning more about the earth, becoming more spiritual, becoming more connected and tied into Mother Earth, and just learning more about ourselves, we are going to be tapped into the natural. And it wouldn't hurt to know what can go with what should go with what, and what should not. Okay? So it's important to remember that hydrogen is the only gas that expands and the temperature rises at room temperature, right? Whereas other gases have a decline in temperature, okay? At room temperature. So that's important because it is combustible but very light. So if you're in a confined space and you want to light a match, or okay, so it's really important for us to learn about this as we start to learn. And it's more abundant in oceans, ice packs, rivers, lakes, and just the atmosphere overall. Now there's also something called green hydro. It's produced using this process where power and electricity is used to form hydrogen, right? And it's natural hydrogen, and it can be stored for later use. So this is important to know because we might need hydrogen. Now, doing a little research, as we just discussed, over 13 billion years ago, hydrogen is the first and most abundant element there is. But research does show that we have been losing at least 3 kilograms of hydrogen a second. But because it's so light and vast, this is probably the only element that we'll never have to actually worry about running out of. And then, when you think about like high altitudes and things like that, it's actually hydrogen that's responsible for creating the vapor, okay, from the water. Okay. So before we end this, I'm just looking over the notes to see, what I could have possibly missed. It's good for your joints and things like that. And it's present in all of the body fluids. So, yeah, I think this was important to go over because we need to start educating ourselves more on these elements, because they are natural and because we are going into a highly spiritual activated, I don't even know what to call it, because the portal has opened and we've walked through it. Everything that's going on right now is going to be residual, and within the next few, I would say in the next week or so, you're going to start settling into the new. Okay, that's all of us. I'm included in the all. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. I do love you guys. I do hope all is well. I hope everyone is enjoying their summer. If you have summer classes, get with me if you need a tutor. I'm going to put my schedule out because I'm going to start doing a virtual tutoring. And I do love y'all. Hope y'all are drinking your water, eating your fruit and your vegetables, and minding your business. And sipping your tea, because is free, okay? And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. I had me some mushrooms today. My friend cooked. It was good. Okay. Love y'all.